In this video, we're going to take a look at applying a payment to a billing account. We'll begin by locating the billing account. In this situation, let's assume that a payment now comes in and we wish to apply this payment against the two invoices that we have for this client. So we would go over to the Pay tab, and from here we would create the new payment. Check payment, the reference number, and let's say the amount was for the total balance of $1,046. The date will default to the current date. This can be changed if desired. So here we have one actual payment received, and below we have two invoices, which each have an individual balance. Let's say we wish to now apply this payment against these invoices. In this case, we would just click on the arrow button and we type in the amount that we're applying, $801. Let's say in this particular situation, we're not going to worry about the referring provider. This could be broken up by referring provider, but let's assume we don't need to here. Additionally, we wish to apply the remaining unapplied amount, which we see up here, $245, against the remaining invoice. Simply by clicking on this button here, we now apply an item and we decide how much we wish to apply, $245. This now brings both balances to zero, and we can see that this payment is applied against these two invoices. You can also track applied items against the referral as well. This can be done for marketing purposes or to determine actual revenue that's received based on either a given marketing campaign by someone who referred a client to you by a commissioned salesperson or something of that nature. We can see there is an open invoice here that has not been paid. There is a balance. So we'll begin by clicking on the Pay tab, and we'll select the New button here in the Payments to do a new payment. This loads the payment and allows us to enter the method of payment, which in this case will be a check, and we'll put in a reference number. And let's say in this situation, the entire invoice is being paid, $1,046. The date automatically defaults to the current date. However, you can change that if you wish. Let's say we wish to make this payment happen on the 4th. You've received this money. This is the actual payment you have received. We wish to apply this payment against the invoice listed here. This list will show only invoices which we consider open invoices, invoices which their status is indicated as open. We'll begin here where it says apply this payment to an invoice. Click on this little arrow icon. This loads an applied item into this portal here. This invoice level payment that's being applied against this invoice and from this source payment up here. Now we could go ahead and type in the entire amount completely here if we wished, and basically would be all done. There are some situations where clients like to track their revenue by either referring or rendering provider for perhaps commission purposes or situations where someone might receive some type of a bonus based on the amount of revenue received versus the amount of revenue charged. In this case, we're going to use the referring provider. This requires that individual applied payments be made for the individual providers. Now, if there were multiple providers here, in this case, we can see that there are. So if we put the mouse over this line, we'll actually see the referring providers on this invoice. So let's say we start by loading Kathy Bowden into this column. We selected Kathy Bowden. This is telling us that $722 of this particular invoice has Kathy Bowden as the referring provider. Change this to $722. Note that we now have an unapplied amount remaining up here that still needs to be applied. So now we're going to look for additional referring providers. We also have Sharon O'Brien. So we'll click this button again to apply more to this invoice. In this case, we don't know what the amount will be yet for Sharon O'Brien. We'll load O'Brien into this item. And we'll note that Sharon O'Brien has $229 of this invoice as the referring provider. So we're going to put in $229. We still have $95 left to be applied. The remaining referring provider in this situation is Jackie Blackwell. So we're going to load Jackie Blackwell into this invoice. Click to apply, load Jackie Blackwell, and we'll put the $95 into the items. This now completes this invoice, and it gives you separate applied payments for each of the referring providers throughout the invoice. In some situations, this will not be necessary. A single payment for the entire invoice will work just fine. This invoice is now paid. So we'll now say this invoice is now closed and complete. This payment is now done. We return. We'll no longer see this invoice in the list. We can clear our folder. That payment is done. That's how we apply a payment.